Yes, we are really excited to have everyone here and to be in conversation today. So just to introduce myself, my name is Alexandra, and I am one of the founding partners of Let's Americas, a full service legal marketing consulting firm. And I'm so excited to be here today with one of my former colleagues, Mattias Cruz, who I used to work with back in my days at International Tax Review and is one of the best tax reporters I know. And I think you're all going to learn a lot on best practices from tax content writing from him.
Hi everyone, so my name is Mattias Cruz and I was an international tax reporter for ITR. And first of all, I need to apologize because I don't look anything like the picture on LinkedIn that was advertised to everyone, where I look very clean and polished and professional. I've managed to miss every opportunity to cut my hair in the lockdown, and now we're stuck until mid-February with very long hair. So apologies for that, but hopefully you can see past that, and we'll be able to provide you some good content for tax writing.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, I'm so excited to be chatting with you. I'm so glad that we are still in touch. Obviously you were well known for writing excellent content, so I think everything you'll have to say is just completely invaluable. So once again, apologies for the delay. Thank you so much to everyone who's here. Please let us know of any questions that you have that you want us to answer in the chat. We'll do our best to try to answer it. We'll try to move quickly as well so that we can get everyone off at a normal time, but also have the chance to answer a bunch of questions at the end. And yes, and of course, after, if time is of the essence, just contact us by email and we'll be happy to answer any lingering questions the best that we can. So Mattias, to get started, kind of a broad question. What would be your one main piece of advice to someone who is looking to produce better content?
It is a big question to kick off, but I think the answer is almost unbelievably simple. It's really two things, but first of all is know your audience, and two is know exactly what you want to say. Everything else really stems from those two, so you need to figure out exactly who you're writing for and what you're trying to tell them. Once you put that into your mind, you have to keep that in your mind throughout writing your content. Everything that's in that article or piece of content needs to be relevant to whoever you're writing it to, and it makes it much easier to trim out anything that's not that important. Of course, writing is a skill, and it only gets better with experience and exposure. So the more you write, the better. And the more you read, from other sources, that will also help you improve your own writing. So I would recommend looking at people writing perhaps similar things, if there are any. Are there things that you like and you can borrow from them, and things you could improve or just do differently from them. So alongside that practice, you need to also just be willing to put your ego to the side, because when you're in the zone and you think what you're writing is brilliant, you just sometimes can forget. And at the end of the day, that writing is not for you, it's for your audience. So you just have to keep your audience in mind. And I guess, as a side note, not everyone is an excellent writer. That's why some people are writers, some people aren't. So, that's why things like content creation agencies do exist.
Perfect. No, a big answer. And I'm sure these next questions will help kind of give more detailed responses as well. One of the things that I remember people asking me a lot when I was with ITR was about what people should write on. Obviously with tax, there are so many different topics. And would you recommend that people focus on writing on more niche or on more broad topics?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those answers is always going to be depends, right? So, striking a balance should really be your aim, and that is part of the challenge that makes writing quite fun. And it very much goes back to figuring out who you're writing for. I think particularly for legal and tax content specifically, there are certain trade-offs when you're doing, broad topics, concept pieces, maybe trend pieces, versus a one niche, very technical piece. But in an ideal world, you'll be able to mix and match a bit of both. So generally, I would say, though, however, that for tax content, you really want to focus a bit more on just on one problem or a jurisdiction, because otherwise you end up losing yourself and writing in generalities that are too big and not really adding anything that valuable. So in an ideal scenario, if you're writing something broad, within it you can add links to other articles that you've written that are more niche. And if you're writing something niche, you can also add some kind of link, or you link it to broader pieces that you might have written. So it's about trying to find a balance.
Perfect. No, that's good to know. Kind of on a similar topic, what would be your best advice on the top ways to self-promote one's content? Is publishing an article on one's personal LinkedIn or website effective enough of a platform to reach one's target audience?
Well, I think just to kick off, is kind of the more platforms you are on, the better. Different people use different audiences. Different audiences use different platforms. But generally, in my experience, I found that LinkedIn has become kind of the biggest hub for sharing tax content. I think Facebook just isn't really set up the right way. Twitter is almost too short, so it's good for opinions, but LinkedIn kind of strikes a good balance where it carries well because it's presented really well within the LinkedIn format. And I found a lot of tax professionals are really active on LinkedIn, so I think that's kind of the one I would recommend the most. In terms of whether you're using your own website, the only the biggest drawback of having your own website, unless you have the resources, is that you have to pay attention to the visual just as much as the content. So you might have the best content in the world, but if it's hard to find and it's hard to read, it's not really worth anything. So the choice really depends on what works best for you and what you have available to you. So that really depends on like how much you're willing to invest in that writing. Do you see it as an opportunity to create more revenue? What is the aim of it? And that will help you decide. I think generally some kind of using just basic journalism and marketing techniques is just having a clear angle. What does your article say? Consistency in publishing, so that means publishing around the same time in whatever time period. So if you're doing Wednesdays at 2 p.m., make sure that it's always around that time. Immediacy as well is very important. So some content has to be published while the topic is still hot. There's no point publishing something that was hot a few weeks ago if no one's really talking about it. But make sure that you're doing it in a timely fashion. Generally, I'd just use all the social media, all the different networks that you can. If you can as well, potentially think about using different styles of content. So modern world, I think a lot of professionals don't have the time to read long tax pieces. So there are opportunities of things like podcasts, just even recording your pieces. Videos, webinars, that's useful. So things that are accessible to people when they have the time is also really important.
Fantastic. Are there any apps or software platforms that people should be aware of to help them produce better content?
Yeah, well, so I'm a bit biased in this because obviously I think nothing can replace or supplement a good writer. However, I understand and recognize that many people will be writing in second languages. That tends to be English. So something like something as simple as a grammar checker would help. There are tools like Grammarly and Hemingway. Microsoft Word does its best, the best it can do. But at the end of the day, I think you either need to have a good writer or a good editor just to make it extra sharp and make it stand out.
Of course. And that's the journalist in you. And I think it's important. I think it's one of the things I think of all the time. I keep seeing all these new platforms emerging in the editing, and grammar spaces. But I agree, there's nothing like having an actual person sitting down and revising it. So I'm glad to hear that AI hasn't taken over and apps haven't taken over just yet.
Yeah. Well, the machines will take over one day and they'll be writing all the content, but until then, I will stand firm.
Perfect. So next question. How do you write in a way that promotes your practice, but also comes across as technical versus purely for marketing?
Yeah, no, that is, I mean, that is a bit of a challenge, and you'd be surprised at how often we get. I'm sure you've seen this as well. How often you get, pieces that are written almost like a puff piece, just saying how great the firm is or the individual is. That doesn't help anyone. No one's going to take you seriously. So the firm or yourself shouldn't really be the focus of the piece. What's really important is the information, is the opinion, is what the value you're adding that no one else is. So if you can weave your expertise, and particularly for firms and people working as consultants, using the comments and the experiences from clients, from high profile individuals, it might be on record. If you can, if they're willing, they can be off record as well. So things like case studies, like how can you dive deep into this one thing that no one else is able to see. That is the key, that that will motivate people to come to you at the end of the day. So you really have to avoid trying to write how great you are, but show how great you are through the writing. So I think for everyone writing, it's about bringing a fresh and unique perspective. That's the real valuable piece. So when you're doing that, you have to ask yourself, has anyone else written about what I am writing? Am I saying the same thing? Can I frame it in a way that is more interesting or relevant to my target audience? And I imagine this is something, that's a big part of your job over at Let's as well. So I'm sure it keeps you busy.
Yes. And no, I like this question in particular because I've seen a lot of articles being published and firms paying for sponsored content where it really just is a marketing plug. This firm is the best, but tailored to an audience that is looking for technical content and to really learn about a subject. And that's part of the reasons why Let's Americas was born was, I saw a lot of great firms and a lot of great marketing teams and tax teams promoting content that was either too technical for kind of the average audience or was a bit too marketing for the audience they were looking for. And so, our team is committed to helping firms really hone in on that writing style and craft that message that is really appropriate for both the platform they're writing on and also that's really engaging and fun to read without coming across as just a marketing puff piece. So
exactly, there's a time and a place for a sales pitch. And instead of doing that, think of the content as the sales pitch. If you can show that you have some expertise and no one else has, fantastic. People will come to you. They will see that, and they will think, this person or firm knows what they're talking about. If I have a question, I can go to them, and potentially that's an opportunity for you.
No, perfect. And I think that's particularly relevant with the crowd that's on this call today, with mostly people focused on international taxation, where there is more of an emphasis to get your name out there and show your expertise through articles and through content when you don't have that opportunity to really meet your target client base in person. And you really have to promote yourself through your writing and through your content. So thank you. So the next one I think is a big one. What are the best practices for busy tax professionals to find more time to write? And how does one motivate themselves to write content?
Yeah, I mean, that is tough. Yeah. So, well, I think so. Yeah. Well, first of all, you just have to see the content as an opportunity for maybe future revenue or future positions. It's really, really, a chance for you to show off all your how smart you are, how much expertise you have, how much experience you have, and how much knowledge you have in a certain subject, or can you provide a really strong opinion on a topic. So I would say once you see it like that, like an opportunity that it might not be cash in hand right now, but it could be cash in hand in the future. that's how you start to prioritize it a bit higher. And I think, often people won't have time to be writing articles every week because, the demands of the job are just too much. But I think, putting time aside when there is a particularly interesting trend or particularly interesting development that you're hearing about and that maybe your clients are struggling with, that's a really good time. As soon as you've caught, wind of it, caught scent of it, great, go for it. If you can be the first, fantastic. If you're still among the first, great. The problem is if you hear about something and then you say I'm going to write about it later, and then later becomes it's old news, then it's not really, and you're not really adding anything new, then that's an issue, and you're not really going to get anything from writing that piece. So it is about seeing it as a real opportunity. I know it's like, in terms of just what comes to mind is looking at, say interesting judgments when there is a big judgment in the European Court of Justice, or maybe Brazil Supreme Court. Can you look at it, read it quite technically, simplify the information while still maintaining the technical strength of the piece, and adding something to it. Can you add an opinion? Can you say like, oh, this is an opportunity, or like certain taxpayers should be wary of this? That's great. That's where you can provide the extra added value that will encourage people to come to you for advice and hopefully become a client.
No, perfect. Thank you. I know, because I'm currently writing content for Let's Americas, and I know it is hard when you're so busy thinking about a million things to just sit down and start typing. And I've also started carrying around like a notebook at me at all times. So I just put down notes when I have an idea or something to think about. And I found that to be really helpful, because sometimes you have the best idea while you're really busy, and then remembering to come back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the truth. So many good ideas happen to you when you're not in the right environment, when your mind is just wandering. Like sometimes I find when I'm on a walk or just like making a coffee, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Like write that down before you forget. But
Yes.
that's a good tip.
Yeah. Sometimes I think I like wake up at 2 a.m. and I'm like, oh, I have this idea, and I keep like a pad and paper next to my bed, and I'll write it down. And
you're dreaming of tax content.
Always. So on a bit of a more technical question, what is the ideal length of an article? How should one best structure an article to ensure that it's read in entirety?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I think as a general motto in this day and age, just the shorter the better. You really have to make sure that each word counts, because at the end of the day, someone's taking time out of their, either professional, working day or weekend or, free time to read your article. So there's no point wasting words on that you don't need. Now, I understand there are technical concepts that have to be elaborated on. I would, as a vague rule, just say like 400 words minimum and a maximum of like 1,500 words. But it really depends on your subject matter and how you're able to break it up. What you don't want is just 1,500 words of complete pure, text, like a Star Wars, starting to Star Wars film. You don't want that. You want like maybe every 400 to 600 words, you want to break it up into subsections to make it easier for the reader to follow. I think with that, it's good to emphasize that context, it doesn't hold very much value. Most of the time, you can shorten a lot of context to your piece to maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs. And in an ideal world, you'll be able to link the context to whatever it is to referring to in a different article. So if people want to see more context, they can go and find it. But really, you just want to get straight to the point. You want to answer, some fundamental questions as to why this is important, and how do you add that value. But yeah, I think, and then on structure side, now that is, that's a journalistic endeavor at the end of the day. So it's difficult to say for each piece, but essentially, what is the most important information? Is there any supplementary information, and does it need to be, there, or can it be lower in the piece? But essentially, you just have to ask yourself, what is the angle? Who does it affect, and why is it important? Again, there are very different styles of writing, and I would really encourage people to be a bit more creative how they approach text content. It doesn't have to be, long form. It can be just bite-sized information that explains the most important thing. If you, it is a challenge, and it is an exercise to strip out everything that's not essential and just keeping the key points to make sure that someone who can just read maybe the title and the caption will just be able to find out exactly what the story is about.
Perfect. Thank you. And I guess kind of building off on that, what are the best practices to create a catchy title or a caption for an article? I think this one's the hardest thing, making a short, concise, and grabby, catchy article title.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing. So with headline writing, people devote careers to it, and it is a question of experience and exposure. So I think with titles first, I would say for a normal title, maybe 7 to 9 words. So nothing too long. I understand that sometimes that's very difficult and you just have to go over, but that's fine. I'd always keep it in the active form when you're writing in English. And also, let people know exactly what the story is going to tell them. So a good headline should really say, you should be able to read a good headline and know exactly what the story is going to tell you. You have to think about keywords as well. I think obviously now when we using search engines and stuff. So if people are searching for this, how would they find it? What search terms would they use? So often if it's to do with a certain company, the company always has to be in the title. If it's about a certain rule or abbreviation, like say anti-avoidance measures, that needs to be in the right abbreviation that people would look for it. Is it a tax authority, HMRC, that needs to be in there. So it's about thinking, putting the position of, again, the reader and thinking, how would they find this article if they weren't just seeing it on my profile? And then the second part, the caption, or the stand first, or whatever you like to call it. Now, you should be able to read this and know exactly what the article will tell you, much like the headline. But within the caption, it's an opportunity to provide almost like a teaser of what you're going to write. So maybe the first sentence explains the context of the importance of whatever you're going to say, and then the second part of it tells you exactly the importance is. So this is why you'll see a lot of people writing stuff like, in an unprecedented, landmark judgment, comma, so and so, will be, charged for their TP transactions. So it is about just building a little bit of tension in that first part, and then finishing it off with that the second part.
Great. No, perfect.
I forgot to mention, let's keep it around 30 words. Anything longer is too long.
We didn't really talk about this, but what do you feel about like clickbait titles?
Yeah, I mean, this is just going to damage your reputation. That's all it is. Like, especially within tax, if you write a juicy headline and it doesn't deliver in the story, people are just going to say, this person just writes that, just for the clicks, and then there's no substance. So I would really steer away from that. However, like if you're writing stuff like opinions, then it's much easier to provide a strong headline, and that's the beauty of writing opinions. But you can't write opinions all the time.
Good to know. So how important do you think images are to go alongside with written content?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's becoming more and more prevalent, and it is good because it does break up the text quite well, especially if it's relevant. So it really depends on what you have available to you. I'd say it's good practice to include images, but particularly graphs, charts, maybe graphics that support your points. So I understand that often like data won't really be available for the legal profession, but firms can think a bit outside the box. They could do a little survey to their clients and to ask about a certain thing, and then put that survey into a graphic and say 40% of taxpayers surveyed said they agreed or disagreed with this. So it's about thinking a little bit outside the box. I would probably stop myself from adding an image unless it added something. So just because it's an image and it's pretty doesn't really help. So really you have to, much in the same way that you don't want to waste words, you don't want to waste space. Really try to, if you're going to add images and graphics, make sure that they support what you're writing.
No, fantastic. That's good to know, since I know a lot of times there's a focus on just putting an image to have an image. So it's good to hear this feedback. So next question. Tax professionals are usually quite technical when they write. How does one adapt their writing style to appeal to a more general audience?
Yeah, that is difficult, and I think I can understand why tax professionals do find that quite difficult, because a lot of your bread and butter is writing technical detail for your clients, and that has its time and it has its merits. It's really about striking that balance between the technical details and the general readability. I think particularly if you're writing for an international audience, which may not be familiar with whatever tax development you're writing about, or whichever jurisdiction you're writing about, you have to really get in the habit of asking yourself, what are the key points? Am I explaining them in a way that's very clear for someone who's never read about this before? Does it need this level of technical detail right now, or can I reserve that for a different situation? And if you're writing to even broader than just tax people, then you have to ask yourself such as things like, will a non-tax person understand this? And that was a big part of my job as well as a tax reporter, is having to find that balance, because we want to make it technical, and there is so much value in the technical detail, but at the same time you can't let people drown in it. You have to have a real mixture, and this is where I would recommend that you work alongside people who have experience and know how to write legal and tax content. I know, like, that's it's just a bit praising ourselves, but this is what tax reporters do, and this is what marketing content creation agencies do as well.
Thank you. So kind of to also follow up with that type of question, one of the things that I think is a big challenge for writing is to address an international audience. I think a lot of people know how to write on a local level, but when you're writing on an international level, recognizing that maybe you're writing English to people who are not necessarily native English speakers, or even, with US writing in England, there's so many cultural differences between writing. So what are the top tips you could share to format your writing to reach an international level?
I think first of all, you need to become aware of what the regional differences are, because you might not know exactly what one country refers to something as another, and you have to be quite willing to clarify things that you think might be obvious. So one thing that we used to do at ITR was clarify HMRC. Now, if you live in the UK, you know HMRC. If you live in Europe, we probably know HMRC, but outside of that, maybe not. And that's that's the UK's tax revenue. But at the end of the day, you need to do that. And things like IRS. Now, everyone knows IRS. Do they? And that's the question you need to ask yourself. Are you talking about the Internal Revenue Service or the Indian Revenue Service? So it's the real, you have to just be sure to, especially words in your language, and make sure that they're translated in a way that's understandable. Don't, abbreviate anything without having, expanded on it at least once. And I guess just refrain from using anything that's local terms and phrases. But, I think generally people will be able to do that.
Perfect. So I know obviously with big publications with ITR, there's always a style guide to help have all journalists and reporters craft their style in a similar way. Do you think that law firms or tax firms should adopt their own firm-wide style guides for writing content?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, it's just generally good to have the same style, because at the end of the day, if you're in a firm and you're writing on behalf of the firm, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing the firm. So it's good to have a same standard of writing, and hopefully it's a high standard. It also just looks tidier if everyone writes in the same format, and it just goes to show that there is an attachment to editorial quality, which is, I think, just generally seen as a positive thing.
Thank you. So this one, I know we touched a little bit about it before, but I think is still my biggest challenge with writing. What are your tips on how to be a better editor of one's own work?
Yeah, that is a challenge. I mean, if I knew I wouldn't need any editors or anything. I didn't want to look at second time. But I think when you finish writing something, I think you need to go take a good break away from it. So that means probably like half an hour, maybe an hour, doing something else, something completely different, and just take your mind off it. Then you need to read it and put yourself in the position of the reader again. So read it with, scrutinize your own work, really. You have to read and just, make sure everything looks like it's in the right place, everything makes sense. And, one trick that I find always helps is reading it out loud. Now, it sounds very silly and it sounds so elementary, but it is so useful to read your own work out loud back to yourself. You will very quickly see what sounds awkward, it sounds like it's not in the right place. Written content is very easy to just trick yourself that you've got it right. But once you read it out loud, you'll see that it just doesn't sound right, and then you need to tweak it.
Perfect. No, it's good to know. I've started reading things out loud and realize sometimes like, oh, that sounds awkward. But when you're reading in your head, you just know what it's supposed to say. So you just think that it's totally normal. Yep. It's also a good tip to be aware of words that you overuse or repeat too often. I also send everything that I write over to people who I trust, usually who can check it over and who I know are good writers. But that's hard, and usually you have to bother someone in the process.
Exactly. I mean, if you have fucking terabytes, it's great, but if you don't, then you have to just think the best you can do.
Yeah. So we just have a few questions left. So for anyone who has any questions for us to answer, please start putting them in the chat, and we'll get to them. We have 4 more questions, and then we are all yours. So this is, an interesting question. Is there a particular non-tax publication whose writing style you admire?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of The Economist. I think they've done a fantastic job at finding that balance between technical detail and just readability. They will dissect some really, really interesting, complicated issues and make it readable. They use interesting turns of phrase. They use puns all the time. Don't be afraid to be a bit creative with writing. They use a lot of graphics, but they have the data available, and it works with what they're kind of writing about. So, I mean, if you just have a look at, very colorful. It's not long at all. So, it's not about, they don't miss out on anything, but they just get exactly what they need in. And I think it's really interesting to pay attention to how they start a lot of stories with either a case study or like a quote or examples of people, like normal people. So I think you can definitely adopt some of those some qualities into tax writing, and I would recommend anyone who hasn't read The Economist to go read The Economist and then try to learn from it.
That's great. I'm going to pick up a copy of The Economist today. So this is a fun question, personal. Yeah. What do you, Mattias, personally find most interesting about tax, and what topics have you most enjoyed reporting on this year?
Okay, so I think what I was covering about, what I really enjoyed about tax is, really it's a global, it's a global issue of content. Everywhere in the world there's something going on with tax. I find that I always found that it was very interesting speaking to, high profile tax people. I loved, sourcing contacts and speaking to people, really high level people at multinationals, at some of the biggest companies in the world. But in terms of topics that I've really enjoyed, I guess mainly in last year, 2020, would have been things like Brazil tax reform. I love writing about it. It's again, it's a complex issue, and there's many different interests, but it's really interesting to write stuff when there's such a need for reform, but it's just still being stalled by politics, really. What else? I've loved writing about stuff like the taxation of space. So concept pieces where there's no really any rules, so you can just run with it and go with it whatever you want to. But it's becoming increasingly obvious that it will become a problem soon. The US has already said that they're gonna start mining. And all activities should just be taxed in the US, but who does space really belong to? Other things like environmental taxation, which is now like a really hot topic, especially with COVID having allowed a unique circumstance for greener recovery. So I'm sure there'll be many environmental taxes all over the world coming in soon. Things like tax risk insurance, I think this is something that's not really that well understood or used, but it's growing its cover, and provides a lot of opportunities. They're basically another tool for tax directors to use to lower risk or segment risk even, and things even there's an opportunity for writing about cannabis taxation. I remember writing about how the pressure from on revenues from COVID-19 only strengthens the case for cannabis taxation, because it's a good boost of revenue, and you at the end of the day you're regulating an industry that's kind of already happening. So yeah, it's really all over the place, and there's so many opportunities to write about interesting things. So that's what I really liked about tax.
Yeah, I loved your piece on taxation on the moon. I thought that was so different and unique, and of course all the Brazil articles. Those were my favorite to work on with ITR. There was no shortage of content on Brazil.
Yeah, there's always something going on in Brazil. Which
is why I've teamed up with Let's Marketing based in Brazil, because it's just such a fun market and everyone there is wonderful. So this is a question that people ask me all the time. What are ways to get your name included in articles and publications without having to pay to be in them? And what opportunities are there for expanding your exposure for yourself as a tax writer, and your name in these publications without having to pay?
Yes, well, so I mean, from my experience, I'd say it's take the initiative. Now that means the opportunities that I see are things like ITR, tax journalists, other publications where you can act as a source. It's great to get out there, get in touch with the relevant people, explain to them what your areas of expertise, what jurisdictions you can discuss, what you can provide content. And another way of going around it is when you find something or you hear something interesting, then take it along to the tax reporter. We will be very grateful if you do that, and would probably be very happy to include your comments on said development. So that's probably the key way to do it, is find the right people who already have an audience, who already are good writers, and get in touch with them. Be a source, become, and that happened to me more than once, several times. It's people coming up to me and said, "Oh, look, this is interesting. You might want to, if you want to write it, I'd be happy to write some comments," and that's great. You can create that connection. Even in an ideal world, you can discuss off the record perhaps what your clients are saying, and if they want to be on the record, great. You can also work on stuff like case studies together, because that's difficult information to get, and having your voice there basically shows that you're an authority on certain subjects. So that's really, that's what I recommend.
No, I think that's great. And it's really important because I think that there's an idea that the only way to get included in these articles and to include content is through paying. And I'm trying to spread the word that you don't have to pay to stand out and to be, have your writing shared and your thoughts shared.
Yeah.
It's great to know. And of course, like you mentioned, it's all about having relationships with the right people, connecting and self-promoting, pushing yourself out there, affirming that you are an expert, which is part of what we're doing at Let's, trying to promote the people we work with and help them find these free opportunities. And as it was mentioned in the comment, there are a lot of opportunities like IBFD where you don't have to pay to publish content and can still get your name out in front of a fantastic audience. So we've come up to our last question. So please, if you have not had a chance to put a question in the comments, please do so now. We would love to answer it. And so for the final question of the day, to wrap it up, what are the top tips and takeaways you'd have for anyone looking to best improve their tax content writing? So basically, summary of everything we talked about.
Well, just hammer this into your head. Know your audience. That is the most important thing. That is going to define the rest of the article for you. So just make sure you know exactly who you're writing. I guess 2 would be work with people who are writers, who are editors. There's a reason why they get paid to do it. That's why. And I think 3 is be creative. You don't have to do the same thing as everyone else. You can write in a different style. You can do it in a different way. So take risks. The worst is going to happen. People aren't going to read it, but if you take risks, you might have the reward that people will share it and read it. So do something different.
Fantastic. Thank you. Know your audience, everybody. That's the takeaway.
Yeah.
That's great. So I'm just looking at
100 times.
Everyone, yes. Put a sign up on your laptop, stare at it all the time. No, it's important. And I love your comment on creativity. I think being an out of the box thinker, coming up with new ways is so important. People like things that are different and that show your personality too, in the best way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, firstly, I've had so much fun chatting with you. So thank you so much. I'm loving reconnecting. I'm looking at the questions. I see there seem to just be 2, I think, at the moment. The first one, well, I guess is directed to you, which is how did you find yourself writing for ITR?
Well, yeah, that is a good question.
Urban passion for tax writing.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I was in a different role where I was writing about things that were more transactional. So it was, I didn't have the opportunity to go really in that deep in any one topic, and it was almost I was just writing facts, which I didn't find that interesting or fun because I was essentially reporting exactly what people were telling me. So I didn't enjoy that much. So then I started looking for alternatives, and luckily I had a mutual connection working for the parent company of ITR, and I read the job description and I thought, okay, this sounds interesting. Long form writing, sure, that's good. Good exposure to do something different. I was a bit hesitant because I was like, international tax, that doesn't sound very interesting, it doesn't sound very fun. But I was really glad I made the decision. I've had a great time writing for ITR. I had incredible sources, and it was really, really fun.
No, fantastic. And I'm so glad that we got to work together. And similar.
Oh, yeah, and obviously I got to meet Ali.
No.
I got to say.
No, it was so fun. But I had a similar story. And of course, being on the business development team, didn't have the pleasure of writing about tax. But when I was at Your Money, I covered a bunch of different teams and publications, and ITR was my favorite. I thought tax was just fascinating. And as you mentioned, it's so relevant to all of our lives, whether we realize it or want to realize it or not. There's one other question, but I'm not. Oh, do you have any regrets?
Me or you? How long do you have?
I think we'll say that if you ever want to meet us for a cup of coffee or something, we can talk more, but.
So, well, no, I don't think so. I feel like I'm one of those people who just, lives life 100%. So I try not to. I try to make sure I don't have any regrets. If anything, it would be, the fact from COVID, we weren't, able to travel as much as I would have liked last year. But you just kind of adapt to it. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's any regrets.
Perfect. No, that's that is the best way to live one's life. No regrets. I feel the same way. I think having a positive mindset is the most important, especially after 2020. So I don't see that we have any more questions. So I guess it's been an hour. We can let people go, but honestly, thank you so much for joining me today. Really enjoyed our conversation. It's so great to reconnect, and you have such valuable insights. And to everyone who's joining at home, at work, wherever you are, thank you so much for being here. We'll send out a recorded version of this so you can watch it later. Really, really thank you so much just for being part of our network, for trusting us to give you tips on text content writing. And please let us know your thoughts, comments, and if you have any other questions, anything that you didn't get to ask, email us, LinkedIn us, and we'll definitely get back to you. So, thank you.
Good, thank you. That's it. Fin.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.